The forest was dense, the trees twisting together in an almost unnatural way. The wind blew with a faint whistle, carrying with it the smell of damp earth and rotting leaves. Emma, Mihai, Ioana, and Andrei made their way through the overgrown path, their feet sinking into the moist soil with each step. "Are you sure it's this way?" Ioana asked, her voice trembling slightly. Andrei, walking ahead, didn't even look back. "Yeah, it's this way. I found it once before, a long time ago." "It's deeper into the forest, but why would anyone build a house here?" Emma asked, her voice carrying a hint of fear. The deeper they went into the woods, the darker and more oppressive the atmosphere became. The sunlight that once filtered through the trees was now almost completely blocked out by the thick canopy above. "I don't know," Andrei responded. "They say no one's lived there for over 100 years. The villagers avoid this place like the plague." Emma shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. Even though it wasn't cold, the eerie atmosphere of the forest made her feel an unsettling chill. After what seemed like an eternity of walking, the trees parted, and in front of them stood the house. It was larger than Emma had expected, an old, crumbling mansion, with broken windows and a sagging roof. The door was made of metal, rusted and heavy, like something from a prison, not a home. Vines had overtaken most of the structure, as if the forest itself was trying to reclaim it. A few of the windows were smashed, and the wind made a mournful sound as it passed through the cracks in the walls. "This is it," Andrei said, his voice barely a whisper. None of them spoke as they approached the house. It loomed over them, casting long, distorted shadows on the ground. The air was thick and heavy, as if the forest was holding its breath, waiting. Andrei was the first to step onto the porch, the wooden boards creaking loudly under his weight. He pushed the door open with a grunt, and it groaned on its hinges, revealing a dark hallway inside. Dust particles floated through the air, caught in the few stray beams of light that managed to slip through the boarded windows. Emma hesitated at the entrance, her hand lingering on the doorframe. Something didn't feel right. She had felt it ever since they had set foot in the forest, but now, standing in front of the house, the feeling had intensified. It was as if the very air inside the house was thick with malice. Inside, the air was stale, and the smell of mold was overwhelming. The floor creaked beneath their feet as they walked down the long, narrow hallway. Paint peeled from the walls, and cobwebs clung to the corners of the ceiling. The house was eerily silent, save for the occasional gust of wind that whistled through the cracks in the walls. They wandered from room to room, finding nothing but dust and decay. Old furniture, covered in white sheets, was scattered about, and strange, unrecognizable stains marked the floors. The deeper they ventured into the house, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. In one of the rooms, Ioana found a door leading down to the basement. "Let's check down here," she said. Andrei looked hesitant for the first time since they had arrived, but he nodded. "All right." The door to the basement was heavy, made of metal, and covered in strange scratches. As soon as Ioana opened it, a gust of cold air hit them, as if something deep in the earth had been disturbed. A set of narrow, steep stairs led down into the darkness. "I don't think we should go down there," Emma said, her voice trembling. Mihai smirked. "Scared of the dark, Emma?" "It's not that," she shot back. It feels wrong." But Mihai ignored her and began to descend the stairs, his flashlight illuminating the stone walls. Reluctantly, the others followed. The basement was vast and cold, the walls damp with moisture. Strange, red symbols were etched into the stone, their meaning lost to time. The room was filled with a deep, oppressive silence, broken only by their footsteps echoing off the stone floor. "What the hell is this place?" Andrei muttered, his voice barely audible. Emma's skin prickled. There was something wrong about this basement, something deeply unnatural. The symbols on the wall seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light. Suddenly, there was a sound, a low, scraping noise that came from the far corner of the room. Everyone froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. "Did you hear that?" Ioana whispered. Mihai swung his flashlight toward the sound, but all they saw was more darkness. The scraping noise grew louder, closer. Emma grabbed Mihai's arm. "We need to leave. Now." Before anyone could respond, a figure emerged from the shadows, a twisted, grotesque creature that barely resembled anything human. Its skin was pale and decayed, its eyes hollow and glowing faintly in the dark. It let out a low, guttural growl, and the sound made Emma's blood run cold. The creature lunged at them. They ran. Emma could barely hear anything over the sound of her own heartbeat, thundering in her ears. They raced through the narrow corridors of the basement, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls, but no matter how fast they ran, the creature was right behind them, its grotesque form slithering through the darkness. Mihai stumbled, and Emma grabbed him, pulling him to his feet. But he was in shock, his eyes wide with terror. He seemed to have lost all sense of direction. The creature let out another growl, closer this time. Shadows moved all around them, as if the darkness itself had come alive. They turned a corner and found themselves in a large, open room. In the center was a stone table, covered in strange objects, a large, rusted ring, a chipped dagger, and a crumbling, ancient piece of papyrus. The walls of the room were covered in the same glowing red symbols that they had seen earlier. "What is this place?" Ioana whispered, her voice trembling. Mihai, still in a daze, reached out and grabbed the dagger from the table. The moment he touched it, his body convulsed violently, and he collapsed to the floor. "Mihai!" Emma screamed, kneeling beside him. He was shaking, his eyes rolled back in his head, and his mouth foamed slightly. Before anyone could react, Mihai stood up, the dagger raised high above his head. Ioana screamed, but it was too late. The blade came down in a swift, brutal arc, piercing her chest. Her scream was cut short, and her body fell lifeless to the ground. The creatures surged forward, feeding on the energy that emanated from her. Their hollow eyes gleamed with a dark, malevolent hunger. Emma stood frozen in horror. She backed away, her eyes wide with terror as the shadows enveloped Ioana's body, devouring it. Mihai, now fully consumed by whatever force had taken over him, stood over Ioana's corpse, his face twisted into a grotesque grin. Emma bolted for the door. She ran through the dark, twisting corridors, her heart pounding so loudly that she could barely hear the sounds of the creatures behind her. She didn't stop, not even when she heard their growls growing fainter in the distance.